Okay, let's get started. Welcome to Workspace Networking. This is the ninth in the 10-part series on the Geek's Guide to Workspace. My name is Matt Brooks. I'm a architect with the Citrix Technical Marketing team. I've been with Citrix about 8 years. I've been in different roles, customer-facing and product, and a good amount of the time I spent working on networking products, so I'm hoping to impart some of my knowledge with you today. And I'm honored to be sharing the stage with my colleague Jesse here.
Everybody, my name is Jesse Wilson. I'm a networking architect with the customer success services side. So I deal a lot with the education, SDWIN, Citrix ADC/NetScaler, and really excited to be here in part 9 of a 10-part series. So we're not the conclusion, we're not the finale, so you can't be angry at us if it doesn't end the right way. And we're not the beginning, so we're not the really exciting one. And unfortunately, they just put snacks out, so you might have a few extra chairs if you want to spread out. We know it's Thursday, we know it's towards the end of the week, and really thank you for giving up a little bit of your time to sit here and hear a little bit more about how we can help engage your workspace. Now, for those of you who just sat the last session, you know what Matt's going to recap, but Matt, do you mind walking us through, if we did not get here prior to the snack break, through session 8, what we just covered?
Yeah, so in the last session, we talked about intelligent workspace and communication. We talked about how we can kind of optimize that. And most companies say that their people are the most important assets. So if we're trying to optimize and improve communication, that's an important thing. We do that through workflows with content collaboration, facilitating getting those files to people where they need them, keeping them safe en route. Using Slack, integrating with endpoint management to facilitate those chat things away from your email, and then using Microsoft integration with Microsoft Teams using virtual apps and desktops. Our session, we're going to dig into the connectivity aspect of a workspace, which obviously if you have your apps, you have your data, you need a way for them to get together. And we're going to break it out into 4 sections. So first we're going to get into the foundations of SD-WAN. If you're not familiar with it, we'll give you an overview. It's definitely not going to be a deep dive, but we'll let you know how it works. Then we're going to talk about virtual apps and desktops, which is obviously a really important technology at Citrix, and I imagine many of you are involved in that. And we'll talk to you about how we can expedite and optimize those connections. Then we'll switch to SaaS connections. Obviously in the cloud era, SaaS technology is becoming huge. Most companies predict they're using a majority of their apps will be SaaS in the next few years. So we'll talk about how we can expedite and facilitate access to those SaaS apps in the internet. And finally, we'll talk about branch communications. There's still a lot of communications and application needs between branches, and we'll talk about how we can facilitate that. So first, Jesse, if you could, let's start off with the introduction to SD-WAN.
Yeah.
You know, what are some of the challenges that we're trying to overcome here?
So for those of you who have not seen Citrix SD-WAN yet, it means you haven't been paying attention for about the last year, as we really started rolling this out a lot last year at Synergy. Citrix SD-WAN is meant to be our WAN solution, branch to branch, branch to data center, and gives you a way to optimize, control, and influence the way you as an administrator decide how you're going to send each packet. Notice I'm not saying each communication or each conversation, each individual packet from each end of the conversation. This is huge when we look at stuff like availability. Now, your server blows up. Yes, we need to have redundancy and backup, but when we're talking about losing connectivity between our branch office, our data center, branch to branch, branch to our cloud or multi-hybrid cloud or our SaaS applications, SD-WAN gives us that ability to have fallback, to have almost instantaneous decision making on not only what is the best path, but which is has least loss, least jitter, and ensure that we have always available applications.
Right, so before the cloud era, obviously LAN and WAN technology was pretty much always on. You sat down, you were able to access your apps. In the cloud era, you need technology like SD-WAN to bring that to you, to provide that availability.
Yeah, the performance piece is huge. I think we've all been in that term of IT of watching paint dry, where you're clicking and waiting and clicking and waiting, and in the virtual app and virtual desktop world, in the remote application and SaaS world, that can exacerbate your end user experience to just ridiculous levels. Again, ensuring not just which path is active, but which path is best for whatever particular type of traffic that you're sending is huge and completely capable with the SD-WAN.
Right, when your applications are dependent on the network, latency is everything, so you need to minimize that as much as possible.
The security piece is a big one for us. We want to make sure that your intellectual property stays your intellectual property. Ensuring that as we're pushing out this software-defined WAN with phenomenal enhancements like the stateless firewall, we're making sure that when you push these out to the edge of your configuration, instead of just using an edge router, you put an SD-WAN device, and now we can extend that firewall protection. We can ensure that we're not only optimizing the data and traffic, but keeping it secure end-to-end, branch-to-branch, branch to cloud environment, all the way through that end-user transaction.
Right, and you can't always, IT can't always rely on applications to provide their own security. You know, network provides an extra layer of security to make sure, particularly if you're sending data out to the cloud, that it's secure in transit.
The visibility one is a huge one for me. I'm a big believer in that proactive monitoring. Proactive meaning before an end user calls you and tell you something is broken, your system's able to tell you that. The visibility down to the packet level as we do the deep packet inspection. When we start tying this into the Citrix Analytics piece and really utilizing the data we're able to get and collect through SD-WAN, and it is literally giving us visibility to each packet that's being sent across the connection, because that's how we determine. We're not sending pings, we're not adding packets, but for us to know which connection is best, we're actually attaching something to each packet that's sent and ensuring that we know exactly how that's performing at each moment in that end user to whatever it would be conversation.
Yeah, per packet's huge for us to know what's going on in real time, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, cloud, I mean the hybrid multi-cloud, SaaS applications in the cloud. If your company hasn't moved to the cloud yet, that's kind of the sense that you're hearing. It's haven't moved there yet. Ensuring that we're able to manage those SaaS applications, interact with those cloud applications as though they were sitting in the room next to us as they were 5 years ago is critical, and SD-WAN helps optimize that connection to do that. Finally, cost, of course, I mean, sounds marketing and you know we're going to save you money, you got to save it to, or spend it to save it type. No longer do you have to replace those or keep updating your edge routers. We're able to take away some of the appliance needs that you have when you add this in. So that's huge in minimizing your infrastructure. The other big piece is, how many of you like buying more bandwidth? It's cheap, right? Go to the accountant, I need 10 gig, I need 50 gig, and they cut you a check right there on the spot. I'm not gonna save you money on the bandwidth you've already purchased. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use all of it. So instead of having backup lines that are never utilized, instead of having failover that never gets touched, having SD-WAN means that we're going to use those back-end connections. Now Matt just brought up another drawing here. Really simple, so taking a look at what SD-WAN does. We see those two big blue bubbles on either side of what's going to be our WAN connection. We've got our data center here on your left, the remote office there on your right. That took me way too long to figure out which direction we were looking, but I'm going to stay with it. So data center on the left, remote office on the right, and what we're doing is SD-WAN is able to see all your connections. We've got cable, DSL, active MPLS. Now, I've got to say, usually our MPLS connection is probably going to be better than our cable or DSL. For your sake, I'm hoping it is, or you have a phenomenal cable connection, and that's great for you. Very good streaming, but usually our MPLS is going to be the best connection. SD-WAN is going to check per packet and decide how I want to send this across. It'll also do this based on how you've ranked that packet via that application. Is this VoIP? Is this bulk printing? Okay, is it a basic Word application? Does it need to be real time? All right, can it handle any latency? Well, if it's VoIP, I don't know if you've ever tried to have any type of Skype or face-to-face conversation, that it's going to be a little bit difficult. So we're going to optimize that jitter, optimize the connection by keeping an eye on the jitter, keeping an eye on the loss and the latency by being able to select all those individual connections.
Right, so in traditional routing networks, just you avoid asynchronous communication, but SD-WAN takes advantage of that. So we're encapsulating all this traffic in a UDP 4980 session that goes across all possible paths, and it's reassembled at the other end. So that's how we're able to send those packets over different links and reassemble them, and the endpoints are unaware of what's happening. We're just optimizing those flows between the branch and the data center.
And we do it between both directions, which is a huge piece. So we're not just looking data center to branch, we're looking branch to data center. It may go over one way and come back another depending on what the best bandwidth at that moment that is available. Now, looking at how it does delivery across the best path. We go through, we have our QoS bandwidth control. So are we looking at real-time connectivity? Are we looking at bulk data transfer? Are we looking at, again, a standard application in the middle? We're going to evaluate per packet. Remember, we're not sending a ping. We're not sending an empty packet. We're not trying to add to your load that's already on your WAN. We're not trying to raise what's going across in your bandwidth. We're trying to optimize and utilize it correctly, which means all my VoIP connectivity may go right through that MPLS because that's the best case scenario. And then I've got a huge bulk printing job that has to go across. Well, if I slam MPLS with that, that may slow it down. But you know what? My internet connection is good. Okay, there's a little bit of latency, but it's bulk printing, so we're fine. It's not going to hurt anything if it's running a few seconds behind. So we can push it right across that internet connection because that's the next best path without hurting that current MPLS connection that's going from SD-WAN to SD-WAN across that connection.
Right, so we'll talk more about this, but it's all about the flows, right? We see the different colored types of lines. SD-WAN is taking this together, assembling at both ends, picking the appropriate path for the QoS. And then real quick, Jesse, we're talking about mostly standard edition features here, right?
Yeah.
There's also another edition, WAN op, which is kind of a predecessor to SD-WAN.
We have kind of three flavors of SD-WAN. We have our WAN op edition, which is just what it sounds like. It's all your optimizations, different ways to control how the packets are looked at, how the traffic is utilized. We have our standard edition, which gets into much more of the actual delivery, doing more of the load distribution, as we're not going to call it load balancing, because it's not balanced, but picking the actual connection that we want. And then we have our premium edition, platinum edition as used to be called, that glues them both together. So you get WAN op with that standard edition together that gives you both the WAN optimization as well as the actual application detail controls. And you can decide, again, where you want the bulk data to go, where you want the VoIP to go, which connection is best, and ensure that all your connections are being metered and being evaluated as you look through this.
Okay, so let's get into some use cases. Let's talk about connections with virtual apps and desktops. So we have a similar diagram that we looked at before. We're going to break out these sessions. But what we're talking about with these different flows is going to be multi-stream ICA sessions, right? So there's different types of traffic that are going to be involved here. And I guess let's just dive right into the user experience of what we're talking about. We'll start with launching a virtual desktop on the user's endpoint. Once the user opens their desktop, we'll see we have the Explorer here open. We're going to start a file. This is going to run a video.
Ooh, Red Bull Racing.
Yeah, it's a cool demo we did of a Red Bull racing car that Citrix sponsors, doing donuts on the roof of a tall building in Miami. So we'll see at first, we're resizing it, and the video and audio quality is okay. This is like a low latency link. We have it's constrained a bit. Now we're going to go ahead and copy a very large file from the data center and from a virtual directory to a local directory on the endpoint. We'll notice as we see some glitches from the interactive mouse traffic, but now as we copy that file and then the bandwidth usage starts to ramp up, we'll see that it affects the quality. We'll see these kind of blocks of pink in the back. And so this is what we're trying to avoid. Right now we're sending all of that traffic over a single ICA stream. So SD-WAN can prioritize that as best as possible, but the file transfer traffic is fighting for bandwidth with the video traffic. And here we see in the monitoring tab a single stream, a single flow. Now if we go back and we've already set auto QoS, and we'll show how to do that in a minute. We'll go back to that virtual desktop session. We'll start the video again. And so now we have SD-WAN at the edge breaking out that traffic into classes that we'll talk more about. There's 4 classes of a service. And now we're going to be able to prioritize this video over the file traffic, and we'll see that we won't have the same interruption in quality. We'll go ahead and take that large file, copy it from the data center virtual directory to a local directory on the endpoint. And then again, we'll go ahead and we'll see that as we we paste it in, the network bandwidth ramps up. We're no longer getting that granularity in the video. The video quality remains good.
So understanding we're not buying more bandwidth here. For those of you that are getting frustrated that you cannot watch Netflix while you do your job, SD-WAN's your answer. Now, what does it mean we're doing? It means we're taking those different connections that you're already paying for, and instead of pushing out this bulk transfer over where we're watching video, over where we're watching our Synergy TV or whatever else it would be, we're utilizing another connection that you already have that can handle that bulk transfer, so we can leave that video alone. We're not, again, buying more bandwidth. We're not asking for more money on the throughput. We're just utilizing what you already have available by deciding in those classes of service where each individual file should be going based upon what the available bandwidth is per that connection. Again, loss, latency, jitter, all those other things, but also how it's going to affect what's already going across that connection. In this case, the Red Bull Racing video that we're seeing.
Okay, so now we'll pause the file transfer and pause the video. We'll go back to our UI for SD-WAN on the MCN. Now we can see that after we made the change, we have those 4 different classes of traffic. It's being broken out and prioritized as well as monitored on the SD-WAN. And then if we go up to statistics and application QoS, we can see the 4 different classes in the top here. Now we'll start the video back up. And we'll notice, we'll see increments in priority 1 traffic. This is the class 1 traffic, which includes video. It's incrementing because that's being passed across the network right now. Then we'll go ahead and pause this, and we'll resume the file transfer. And now we'll notice the priority 2 traffic is incrementing. This is the class 2 traffic. Again, this is the ICA stream that's being broken out into class 2 because it's file traffic. So you can see it's pretty easy. SD-WAN is fairly easy to set up, but we'll see in a minute. It's very easy to configure and obviously good user experience.
It really is. It can really change, again, not how much bandwidth you need, but really just what you have is being used. Now, looking at that initial connection, Matt, can you walk us through what the virtual desktops will look like without that multi-stream ICA, without the multi-stream connection?
Right, so initially when we ran it without the multi-stream, SD-WAN is still, it's aware of all the links. It's going to try to prioritize that stream as best it can, but it's not breaking it out. It can't send the video on a different path than the file traffic. So we said we have 4 classes of traffic. The first, the real time, is for audio. That has to have expedited forwarding, in terms of quality of service. The priority 1 class is for graphics. So it's mostly the video content. Priority 2 is for mostly bulk virtual channels, such as file transfer. And then 3 is low priority printing. It can happen whenever it happens.
And again, these are default classes, but these are things that, if you've been doing this for a while, and I hate to date myself or anyone else sitting in this room, this is not brand new stuff. Okay, the idea of picking a class of service for a packet that you want to send across your WAN, this is not a Citrix innovation of the last 2 weeks. No, this is something that's been around for a while, but the way that we used to do it was so labor intensive from an administrative standpoint is ridiculous. We're talking about changing ports. Okay, we're talking about segregating the data, going in per each packet, having to label, is it we going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, is this real time, is it not, whatever it is. So looking at how we can do class of service, utilizing the SD-WAN map, what's changing, what's different, what's easier for me as an administrator?
Right, so before SD-WAN, we had the ability to do this, in the controller, the virtual apps and desktops controller. We could actually configure those classes of service on a different TCP port. So when it was seen on the network, the firewalls and the switches, routers, they could have priority queues that match that and send it on its way as a different stream. Then we also came out with another version where we could tag those 4 streams. So it already had a QoS tag in it. It's same 1494, 2598 ports, but it had a different tag and was prioritized differently. So what we're doing now with this feature on SD-WAN is that through the same ports 1494 in a single stream, When it hits the SDWIN box, we're breaking it out automatically, so there's no configuration required on the controllers and no changes on your network equipment, which it can be very intensive and take a lot of change controls, firewalls.
There's no group meetings with your security department. There's no Monday afternoon meetings because security decided to close a particular port that wasn't in use, although it was in use because you changed your priority. Okay, we're allowing the SD-WAN with a couple of checkboxes to give you as administrators the ability to designate this should be real time, okay, this is a bulk transfer, and here's how I want these to go across. Not adding tags, not changing ports, not having to have change windows, again, multiple meetings, different teams involved. You are getting the control over the traffic without having to make all these, I'll call them old school, but without having to make all these old school adjustments that leave the door open for security issues with additional ports. They leave the door open for connectivity issues because we have security that's doing their job, going through closing ports that may or may not be open. And we still have a lot of chances of tags getting lost, ports getting closed, or different connections that are just not working correctly.
So what this looks like with multi-stream ICA multi-port, a flow is going to come out, for example, the audio from the controller, and it's going to hit the SD-WAN and be sent in different streams and reassembled. And then there's going to be a separate stream and a separate port for the priority 1, priority 2, and then priority 3 traffic. And then similarly, on a similar type of setup, we're doing multi-stream ICA single port tagged. We're sending that traffic out in multiple flows from the controller that's already tagged. So SD-WAN sees this and it's acting on it. But obviously, as Jesse said, there's definitely overhead to implement this. And so what we're doing here with the multi-stream ICA single port, if you're a virtual app and desktop administrator, don't have to do anything. That's coming out as a single stream, the priority 0, priority 1, and priority 2 traffic. Same stream coming out of the controller. When it hits the SD-WAN instance, that's breaking it out automatically, picking the appropriate channel for it based on its quality of service needs, and then reassembling it at the other end.
Now, if you noticed right there, it broke the real time into 2. And that was weird. It went top and bottom, right? Guess what you can do if you are so concerned about the ability for you to do live video, real time, everything else. You can have SD-WAN take your single packet, duplicate it, and send it across 2 paths. Whichever packet gets there first, that's what it uses, other one it drops. Yes, it will use double the bandwidth on your WAN because we're sending it both ways, but we're going to pick 2 different methods to get it there. And that way you ensure not only is your packet always going to get there, but we're getting it there as fast as it possibly can by sending it over 2 different routes. So there's so many options in this configuration. Matt, can you walk us through the demo here on the admin experience for this, what it's going to look like?
So we're going to start in our MCN. Here we're back to the monitoring tab, and we're just verifying this is before implementing. We have a single stream here. Okay. So this is our kind of a standard configuration channel in SD-WAN. On the MCN, we go to the configuration tab. We'll open virtual WAN. We'll navigate to configuration editor. Then here we'll see we have our MCN site, which represents a data center and a branch. We have a couple of Ethernet interfaces. This is where the controller resides, and in the branch, a couple of Ethernet interfaces. This is where the endpoint resides. Both have WAN links to the respective WAN channels, the internet, MPLS, or LT, what have you. So to configure this, we're going to go to the global tab, applications. We'll see here we have our deep packet inspection enabled, DPI. We'll talk about that more. And we just have to enable that for ICA applications. There's a single checkbox. So we're going to go ahead and apply that. And then once that's applied, we follow our standard implementation process. We'll save that off, and then we'll push it out to our change management inbox. We'll export that. And then this is our standard SD-WAN change management process. If you're not familiar with it, it's kind of structured where you go ahead and you'll know what your active config is and the stage config that we just saved. We'll go ahead and push that out to each of the boxes. So obviously this is done centrally. You could have 2 or you could have 100 sites. It's the same process. Once it's pushed to the box, we go ahead and activate. This is where we're actually applying it to the boxes, and it's kind of a pretty structured change management process. You have plenty of chances to bail out or revert if needed. So then that's it. Once you're done, you're active. It's breaking out those those classes of service.
Again, there are still configurations, but beyond the skip aheads of a couple of 30 seconds here as we're waiting for it to load, excuse me, you're literally checking a box to allow it to do this. Again, you're not going in and reassigning ports. For those of you that have done the multi-threading in the past and done these additional configurations and screwed it up as many times as I have, this is so much easier. Using the master control node, you're making your change on one device and then pushing out the config to all your other appliances, okay, that are mirroring that configuration. It's a real set it and forget it type of configuration, and it just ensures that as you're kind of doing this for the first time, or as you're doing this throughout your process, it is really, really quick and simple going through the GUI there on the SD-WAN.
All right, Jesse, so now let's talk about SaaS connections. So
let's do it.
Specifically from the branch, right? So at the branch, yeah, obviously we talked about getting back to the data center, but there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to go directly to the internet at the branch, right? You may have POPs or applications that are closer to you than hairpinning back through your data center. You may want to go to a web gateway to have some filtering done. You may have a SaaS application that you want to get to, and obviously you're going to save a lot of time and reduce your latency from not backhauling through the data center. And of course, you may want to go to the data center. So SD-WAN can do this in the branch. And we do this through deep packet inspection. That's one of our big technologies. Thousands of applications we can identify automatically. And along with that, just to set up a branch to do this, there's a few other things. We need to provide a firewall. We provide DNS. We basically move the edge to the branch. So it's a good, lot of good use cases for doing this in the cloud area.
It's huge, and the days of taking your truckload of cash and dumping all of it into your data center, because the old school hub and spoke of all your branch offices have to connect to the data center to go anywhere else, even though it may be going from California to Florida just to get to an internet application that's hosted somewhere in Missouri, is just crazy. So we no longer have to just keep building up those mainstay data centers, because we're extending that software-defined WAN, and we're extending your ability to decide, should this branch office backhaul back to the data center? Should it go to the internet, web gateway, SaaS, whatever it would be? And how do you want to control and interact with all of those hybrid multi-cloud or SaaS applications? Okay, not everything has to route back through that main box. We can allow our other pieces without breaching security, without having risks, because we're extending the firewall. Okay, we can extend the VPN communications, whatever else we need to, without having those additional risks by not routing everything back through the data center.
So there's some financial benefits to this. Branch consolidation, right now you're putting you can get rid of your edge router and any other point solutions. You can pretty much put SD-WAN in place for those. And once it's in place, there's additional benefits. So now you can take SaaS connections and route them directly to the internet. So, and in the case of Office 365, we have a special way to do this. Microsoft has these network connectivity principles that allow us to download these images, basically, that describe different types of applications and their routes, and they allow us to determine whether it's beneficial to route it out directly or backhaul it. And so by doing that, we've identified significant improvements in the performance, about much faster download and upload speeds and better call quality if you're using Skype or things like that.
Mm-hmm. No, our partnership with Microsoft has been huge, and not reinventing the wheel here, but utilizing the measurements they have, utilizing the work Microsoft has already done to say, look, if you push this app directly, if you connect to it directly, here's the savings that you're going to have, is critical. Can we look, you mind walking us through what the Office 365 optimization looks like?
So here we see our different flows, and basically if we're going to connect to Office 365 in a backhaul scenario, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be optimized across your wide area, but you're going to hairpin through the data center, and obviously that's going to be more latency. And so here's a quick look at what's going to happen if we do that. So here's the Microsoft Network Assessment tool, and we can see this is going to measure call quality as if we were doing a Skype call. We can see in this scenario where we're being backhauled, a lot of jitter, a lot of loss as you'd expect. The farther the distance, the worse quality of the links. Downloading a file, I mean, who wants to wait a half an hour? And if you're going to search for Outlook online, it's very poor user experience. So not a good thing. Now we'll go ahead and look at, simply if we're going to, set up our SD-WAN in our branch to break out traffic so we have direct access to the internet, we're going to be able to find the closest Office 365 POP, and we're going to improve the quality significantly for the user experience. So now we'll see in the column on the right, first we're running our network assessment tool, and it greatly reduced latency here. This is being that branch connecting directly to Office 365 POP. So very good parameters for the call quality there. Then the download, looks like we're going to take 3 minutes, so an order of magnitude difference, and then obviously the Outlook search is lightning fast. So this is really a nutshell of what you get by doing this. It's very beneficial to your end user experience.
No, it's big, and again, I mean, the numbers are great. Just the idea that a path directly to where Office 365 is being hosted versus going back to your data center, then back across that WAN connection, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to get a better connection. You're also going to not use as much bandwidth across your WAN. You're also not going to be utilizing the SD-WAN on the data center, the SD-WAN and your other connection methods on the data center side. So we're limiting the amount of resources that are going to be utilized by not doing that backhaul. It's big. Now, Office 365 already has endpoint categories that give you that ability to review, the optimize, the allow, the default. And again, this stuff is already pre-configured by Microsoft, already sorted by them. I've said it before, but not reinventing the wheel. We're utilizing work that our partners have done to help optimize applications that you and your team are using every day.
Yeah, this is just a look at, this is directly from Microsoft's description of their connectivity principles. They break it out into 3 types of classes, and you can enable one or all 3. And they kind of, it's kind of like you try and see if you have some performance issues with one, you can undo it. And it's identified by these definitions here. You have the app, the specific IP addresses, and I think what it comes down to is not all apps are in the same POPs globally. The less they're dispersed, probably the less benefit you would get. So let's take a look at configuring this in the SD-WIN console from an administrator perspective. So we're back at our MCN, and in the same spot we were just at to configure the DPI for IC applications. We're going to go to global applications, and then there's a drop-down for Office 365 breakout. And here we see those 3 categories, okay? So we're going to say have them checked by default, and then obviously if you have issues, you can start with default, uncheck it, and move your way up. And we'll keep a table here. We'll look at just by selecting those, we're going to automatically do some things for you. So first is we're going to configure an application object. This is needed by the depacket inspection machine. Next, we're going to create a firewall template for you. We mentioned obviously if you're connecting to the internet directly, you have to have a firewall. This is going to give you a stateful connection out to there and block other traffic that you don't allow through the firewall. So we set that globally, right? If you have hundreds of branches, it's going to apply to all those. But if we go back to our connections here, we'll see that globally we don't set that by default, but you have the ability to override that. Here we can see our routes. This is for our underlay network, so this is going to be set beforehand. This isn't something you enable, but we do add the application routes. These are needed for SD-WAN to know that they need to route this type of traffic. It identifies with the DPI engine, out to the internet directly. And last, of course, is DNS. We have DNS transport forwarder entries, so it needs to resolve those sites as well for the domain names. And then, of course, beforehand, we had configured DNS services. This is not configured automatically. So you'll have this, and you'll have your WAN and LAN WAN links configured as well, which we showed. Those are just basics for whatever use case you have with SD-WAN. So you can see, very straightforward, a few check boxes to configure. Not a bad deal. And if we drop into the monitoring tab, we look at the firewall section, we'll see that it'll create individual entries for each of those flows, right, as it identifies the different types of traffic, SharePoint, Outlook, what have you. So good perspective there to be able to monitor that traffic. And also if we drop into the statistics section, we can pull up our application routes, and we'll see there's hits. This is how we can tell that those 3 connectivity principles are being hit and how often. So let's look at the admin side. Pretty straightforward. Yeah,
it is. And we talked about the backhaul in Office 365. Let's take a peek at the branch connections piece and how we can kind of mimic not having to do that additional jump back. So again, our hub and spoke model of our data center being the end all be all center of our networking environment and of all our connectivity. What we're able to do with SD-WAN is do the branch to branch connection. Okay, in this case, we're talking the US branch and the European branch. And Matt, you get to be Europe because you say Azure and I say Azure.
Azure.
So
French.
we have, yes, it's French. It's completely French. I just Americanize it. So we have these branch offices that are separated by an ocean, at least one, and yet we may be connecting to them by hitting a data center that's completely somewhere else. So we have to ensure that we are utilizing these direct connections whenever possible, depending on if we're hosting things at different branch offices or where we're making our connections. That same traffic steering we talked about when going directly to the SaaS apps, directly to those other pieces, we can do that branch to branch once we talk about integrating it with Microsoft vWAN.
Yeah, the side benefit of you can do branch to branch, but also you get a fast route into the Azure. So if you have applications hosted there, you're benefiting as well. So, again, look at our standard architecture, and this one's a little bit hard to explain just through our architecture picture. So this is without integration with Azure. Obviously, if you have SDWIN in your branch locations, they can benefit from traversing the internet.
Yeah.
But obviously, the internet is best effort, right? You pay for getting access to it. You don't pay for getting all the way across it. So there's some challenges with that, right? You may start on a fat pipe, but then you may hit some, an outage along the way. That traffic may get through a smaller pipe, or there may even be congestion where some packets get through, some don't. So, not necessarily guaranteed transit on the internet.
No, and it's not necessarily guaranteed speed end to end. So you're going to see changes and differences. The big benefit, once we start looking at vWAN, we are not out there laying millions of miles of brand new pipe. What we're going to do is leverage what our partners already have, and that's looking at the Microsoft Azure global high-speed network, meaning we are going to find those pods that are closest to our connections, and we're going to ensure that those are the ones that we're jumping into. Okay, these miles of fiber that are already laid, we can leverage them through the SD-WAN and through this vWAN integration to ensure that we're not getting bad hops and that we're getting the most direct hops possible to go from our US to our European branch.
Right, so like Jesse said, now we're basically getting a high-speed connection across the Azure backbone. Those branches are now using the internet just for the last mile. They're connecting to those Azure POPs, but once they're connected, they're taking that high-speed link across the Azure backbone, and that's likely going to be a very good connection, much better than the general internet. So let's talk about the admin experience, and this we're not going to show a video. I'm going to show there's three sections. I think in a video it probably looks more convoluted than it is. There's three areas we have to set up for this, okay? So the first is the branches. This is where we're going to configure your physical interface to the internet. Obviously that has to be in place. We're going to configure the WAN link and the internet service. The internet service is what's going to be used to set up an IPsec tunnel on that endpoint. The next is going to be, which we'll talk about in a second, is the Azure portion, and then obviously the Citrix SD-WAN is our virtual machine that glues together and configure this. So here's a look back at the MCN in the connection section. We've created an internet service, and we mapped that to a physical, internet connection. This is a requirement. So when we communicate with Azure, this is going to be uploaded, and it's automatically going to push down the configuration details for the IPsec tunnel. So I don't know if anybody's ever set up an IPsec tunnel manually with a router. It can be very ugly figuring out all those ICA parameters. This is done automatically. You don't have to touch it. Other aspect is Azure, of course, and you're going to see some of the same constructs, the resource groups, virtual networks. And the new one you're going to introduce is a virtual WAN. And in a virtual WAN, we're going to map a VPN hub to that. So here we are in the Azure portal, and we've added a virtual WAN, and we added a VPN site. That's one of the first configuration steps. And in the VPN site, we configure the network that's going to be used for this. All of these IPsec tunnels, they're going to have a network range that they're going to use. And then here's the hub integration. The virtual hub is what you actually pay for. So this is where you need to do some sizing and be clear, because if you're not, you might get charged for more than you're expecting. Mm-hmm. And then the last step is with Citrix SD-WAN Center. So this is where we're going to integrate with Azure. We're going to communicate with all of those branches, find out the internet configuration that we did on the MCN, and we're going to communicate with the Azure virtual WAN, and it's going to magically push down our configuration for all those IPsec tunnels. So here's what the SD-WAN center looks like. This is running on a virtual machine in the network I used. And here's a look at the Azure details. So we have to put in a subscription ID, tenant ID, app ID, and then the secret key. And this is all found in that portal. Most of it's under the AAD section. And once this is complete, we're communicating with Azure, and then it takes about 24 hours. I can tell you it's not instantaneous, but once it is, we'll get the tunnels deployed sign, and we'll know that we have connectivity, and each of those branches have an IPsec tunnel back to that hub, and then they're able to communicate and route between branches or to applications that you're hosting in Azure, like we talked about.
Now,
so Jesse, let's wrap it up.
As much as Matt and I really appreciate your time this week, because it's very, very valuable. 45 minutes with us is not going to get you completely ready to go out and deploy SD-WAN, use it with CVAD, your SaaS, and Microsoft vWAN. But understanding what SD-WAN is designed to do past just the marketing pages that you see online, okay, starting to realize how it can work for your branch to branch, how it can optimize and make those QoS selections without you as an administrator having to spend hours selecting different ports, doing tagging, everything else is huge. Simplifying those connections to your SaaS applications, allowing you to have that true hybrid multi-cloud environment without losing any of your end user experience is big. Your Citrix Virtual NAS and Desktops environment, that auto QoS feature, okay, we're talking about thousands of applications already discovered, okay, already understood by SD-WAN. The integration with Microsoft Office 365, those optimizations that are already there. This is stuff you could do, and it will take you hours of configuration versus the checkbox you saw in our demos. Understanding that you can identify what app it is, give it the priority you want in your workplace. Okay, where does Office 365 rank upon what you're working? What about your custom apps? What about your Workdays, your Concur, your SAP? You can decide what priority you want to give to each of these applications that are auto-discovered once the SD-WAN can see what's going across our environment. Using that DPI and deep packet inspection, we can see what is already there. The SaaS applications, integrating with the cloud environment, understanding how important it is for not us just to have that connectivity, but to make sure it's reliable, to make sure it's secure, to make sure our end user experience is the same as if that was in the office next to us, without having to do that backhaul all the way back to our branch office, from our branch office to our data center. I urge you, take some time in that SD-WAN GUI. Okay, if you haven't got to play with it, there's lots of resources available.
Yeah, TechZone. Been in the other sessions, you've heard about this. We have a lot of content out there. We have I know I did a tech note on SD-WAN, and there's plenty more in the works. Probably by the end of the quarter, I'll have one on the Office 365 breakout. After stop up, get stickers. Cool to put on the back of your mobile devices or laptops.
Citrix Customer Success Services has a training.citrix.com site. Yes, we do instructor-led trainings and everything else. The big push we have now, between this week and last week, we just released 350 new e-learning videos, come complete with labs. If you visit the booth in the expo hall, they give you 5 days of premium access, which is free. You can go in and see everything. This includes active labs on SD-WAN, active labs on Citrix ADC version 12.1, active labs on CVAD. All right there, and we have the promise of uploading another at least 700 by the end of the year. And by promise, I mean my boss made a requirement of my job, so I promise you it's going to be there. But this will continue on the e-learning side, as well as understanding we have a cert center where you can take your certification exams. They're open for I think another 4 hours today. But just lots of other resources. Again, I told you, this is not the last session. Okay, we have the finale where we see who gets the throne or whatever it is. Gandalf gets the ring there. I'm not sure what happens, but what's happening in the next one, Matt?
So stay tuned. Our 10th and final episode coming up. There's going to be a deep dive on machine learning and behavior analysis behind Citrix Analytics, and find out a lot of the the great technology we've been working on to protect and monitor your Citrix Workspace environments. With that, before you leave, please do the survey. That's how we know what we're doing good, what we're not doing well. The sessions are on demand up on citrix.com today. You'll be able to download the presentations by June 3rd. Give us session feedback in the app, play game on, and please tweet about it, SYN234 or Citrix Synergy. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. I appreciate it.